The opening chapters of the New Testament contain two distinct lists of names that, at first glance, appear to describe two different families. The Gospels of Matthew and Luke both document the ancestry of Jesus of Nazareth, but their records differ drastically in the specific ancestors they prioritize. To understand these records, we have to look back to 586 BC. The Babylonian Empire conquered Jerusalem. The kingdom of Judah collapsed, its people were forced into exile, and centuries of historical archives were scattered. Despite the chaos of the exile and the divergence of the two gospel accounts, both genealogies converge perfectly on one specific historical figure, a man named Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel was the governor who led the first wave of Jewish exiles back from Babylon to Jerusalem to rebuild the destroyed temple. He was the anchor of the restoration. Both Matthew and Luke agree that Zerubbabel is in the lineage. The problem is that the generations immediately above and below him completely contradict one another in the two texts. This forces a historical question. Are these divergent names simply errors, or do they represent distinct, deliberate traditions of ancient record-keeping? The textual evidence points to two different tracking methods. Matthew traces a legal royal succession to the throne of David. Luke traces a strictly biological ancestry through a separate, non-royal family line. Resolving the conflicting names around Zerubbabel requires pulling back the layers of ancient Jewish law and language. Doing so proves that both lineages are historically accurate and legally necessary. Looking at this diagram, both Matthew and Luke identify Shealtiel as Zerubbabel's father, but Matthew lists King Jeconiah as his father, while Luke traces back to Neri. This contradiction is the pivot point. Two different men are recorded as the father. Under ancient Jewish law, it was common for a man to have a biological father and a completely separate legal father. Families utilized mechanisms like dynastic adoption or levirate marriage to prevent a lineage from dying out. These laws allowed a man to legally inherit the name and estate of one father while biologically descending from another. In this framework, Shealtiel appears to be the biological son of Neri, belonging to the non-royal branch of David's family. Because Jeconiah was the last reigning king and the royal succession needed to be preserved after the exile, Shealtiel was legally adopted into the throne line. This arrangement bridged the gap between David's two sons, Solomon and Nathan, ensuring the legal right to the kingdom continued even as the physical monarchy was stripped of its power. The contradiction above Zerubbabel disappears when we read the texts in their cultural context. We are looking at a perfectly preserved dual record of biological reality and legal royal succession. Shifting the investigation to Zerubbabel's descendants introduces a different kind of problem. For our baseline historical record here, we rely on the Old Testament book of 1 Chronicles. This chart displays the historically verified children of Zerubbabel according to Chronicles, including Meshullam and Hananiah. But Luke's descent lists a man named Risa as the immediate next generation. The official family lists in Chronicles do not include the name Risa. Did the writer of Luke invent a son out of nowhere, or are we looking at a textual artifact? The answer lies in the linguistic evidence surrounding the Aramaic language, which was commonly spoken by the Jewish exiles in Babylon. Risa is the Greek transliteration of the Aramaic word Risha. Risha is not a personal name. It is a title that translates to prince or leader, a highly accurate political designation for a governor like Zerubbabel. When early scholars were compiling these Greek genealogies from older Aramaic records, they mistook this title for a personal name. Luke's original source likely read Zerubbabel the prince, followed by the name Johanan. The genealogy simply continues with the next actual biological descendant. Understanding Aramaic etymology eliminates the discrepancy in Luke. The biological line remains unbroken, temporarily hidden behind a simple translation error. Matthew's post-exilic line presents a structural challenge. He lists a man named Abiud as the son of Zerubbabel, followed by Eliakim. Exactly like Risa, the names Abiud and Eliakim do not appear anywhere in the Old Testament lists of Zerubbabel's children. To understand Matthew's record, we have to look at how ancient Near Eastern cultures handled data. They frequently used telescopic genealogies. A telescopic genealogy is a family list that intentionally omits intermediate generations to highlight specific, important ancestors. Matthew explicitly organized his entire genealogy into 3 distinct groups of 14 generations. 14 from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile, and 14 from the exile to Christ. To achieve this rigid structure, he compressed certain sections after the exile. Abiud was likely a later descendant of Zerubbabel. His immediate ancestors were skipped to maintain the strict legal and symbolic structure of the document. Modern readers expect comprehensive, literal family trees. Ancient record keepers prioritized establishing the primary legal milestones of a dynasty. Matthew's omitted generations are a deliberate feature of ancient legal formatting, not a historical error. The integrity of the royal claim remains intact. Viewing the fully resolved family tree, both branches intersect perfectly at Zerubbabel. On the left, Matthew's record preserves the legal, royal succession, establishing the right to the throne of David. On the right, Luke's record preserves the strict biological ancestry within the wider Davidic family. The apparent contradictions between the two texts dissolve when we apply the historical realities of legal adoptions, Aramaic titles, and telescopic structuring. Zerubbabel is the linchpin of both records. He brought the exiles back and ensured the survival of the community when it was nearly erased from history. Preserving these distinct lineages required maintaining exact records through kingdom collapse, foreign exile, and centuries of dynastic transitions. This dual record ultimately serves a unified theological purpose for the gospel writers. They are demonstrating that Jesus stands within the historic promises made to David. The presence of Zerubbabel in both accounts is proof that the covenant with David was not destroyed in Babylon. It was quietly, carefully preserved. The genealogical intersection at Zerubbabel provides a record of Jesus Christ that accounts for both his physical ancestry and his legal claim to the throne of Israel.